The day of the company's annual gala, the CEO's old flame, Julian Moore, came back. I saw it with my own eyes, my girlfriend Victoria Thompson, grabbing Julian's hand, practically shaking with excitement. She even got on stage and belted out a song for him. That night I tried to take a drunk Victoria home, but she just snapped at me, accusing me of having no gentleness, of only knowing how to ruin her moments. Just go home by yourself. Looking at her furious face, my heart began to turn to ice. I had loved this woman for 3 years, only to end up with this. Back at my place, my assistant sent me a video. Victoria was clinging to Julian's hand, giddily saying, "Julian, I've waited so long for you to come back." Watching the clip of Victoria, I knew it was all over. Back home, watching the video again, seeing a slightly tipsy Victoria ramble on to Julian about her struggles over the years, about how much she missed him, I knew I had lost. For years, I was the one by her side. I was the one who helped her grow the company from the ground up. I was the one who drank myself into a stomach ulcer to close enough deals for her. She once said she would only love me for the rest of her life. She also promised we'd get married right after this gala. Just yesterday I was ecstatic, believing the wedding I'd been dreaming of was finally within reach. But now, I knew I was wrong. I dialed a number I hadn't called in a very long time. "Mom, I want to come see you." On the other end, my mother was silent for a moment before saying, "Then come home to me. Sincere, don't worry, no matter how badly you've been hurt, Mom is here for you." I choked up. My mom could clearly tell something was wrong with my voice. She asked if she should come to me, telling me she could handle anything for me. "Mom, I want to handle this myself first," I said, steadying my voice. "I'll come to you when it's done." It had been years since I'd seen my mother. I still remembered the day she left. It was a rainy night. My dad's old flame had returned, and he had spent the night with her behind my mom's back. When my mom, Catherine Clark, found out, she filed for divorce. Back then, I couldn't understand her. My dad, David, didn't want the divorce, but Mom wouldn't budge. As a child, I thought she was heartless for leaving us despite Dad and me begging her to stay. But now I finally understood how she must have felt. After hanging up with my mom, I was about to go to bed when I received another video. This time, it was from Julian. In the video, Julian was holding Victoria. The two of them locked in a passionate kiss. "Vicky, will you love me forever?" he murmured. The moment I saw Victoria nod, my heart turned to ash. For years, I had poured my heart and soul into pleasing this woman, the one I thought I would give up everything for. In the end, she had utterly destroyed me. In the video, Victoria was smiling at Julian, a smile I had never seen before. With me, she was always stern and cold. I had assumed that was just her personality. I was wrong. It was never her. She just never wanted to be that way with me. She saved all her warmth for Julian, leaving me with only the dregs of her seriousness. I fell asleep watching that video, utterly exhausted. The next morning when I woke up, I found Victoria had shown up at my apartment at some point. Seeing me come out of my room, she greeted me as if nothing had happened. "You were already asleep when I got back last night, so I just slept in the guest room," she said, pointing to the other bedroom. It was as if I had somehow wronged her. I didn't say anything, just nodded. Seeing my expression, she suddenly said, "I drank too much last night. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have spoken to you like that." "I know," I said, nodding. "You saw Julian. Are you happy?" "Sincere, there's really nothing between Julian and me," she said, suddenly flustered. A flicker of panic crossed her face. Then she added, trying to explain, "Actually, it was Julian who told me you might not feel well after drinking so much and that I should come take care of you. He's a very gentle, kind person," she said, looking at me. "Don't misunderstand him. I just stared at the woman in front of me." Victoria rarely spoke to me this proactively or at this length, yet every word out of her mouth was about Julian. I knew then that Victoria loved Julian to her very bones. If that was the case, why should I be the one to hold on? "Sincere, haven't I told you? We're getting married after the company gala," she said, turning to look at me with great seriousness. "Since we're getting married, you should just stay home from now on." The house needs someone to look after it, and you know the company can't run without me, so you should resign." I froze when I heard that. The department I managed was the core of the company, absolutely crucial. Most of the company's business went through me. If I resigned, the entire operation could grind to a halt. I'd been aware of this risk for years, which is why I was training my assistant, Chloe. She had already taken over many of my duties, but even so, I couldn't just leave the post yet. Victoria knew this. "If I resign, who takes over?" I asked, looking at her. She looked visibly uncomfortable before saying softly, "Julian just got back. I was planning on letting him take over your department." My eyes went wide. I'd been with Victoria long enough to have heard about Julian from others. He had studied art overseas. To have someone like that take over all my responsibilities. Had Victoria lost her mind? At that moment, watching her look down, unable to meet my gaze, I didn't even have the energy to curse her. "Fine," I said. "If that's what you want, I can resign." Victoria clearly hadn't expected me to agree so readily. A look of delighted surprise flashed across her face. "Really? Sincere, I knew you'd agree. Don't worry, we'll get engaged right away." I watched her ecstatic face and said nothing more. I went back to the company to discuss my resignation with Victoria. Over the years, I'd poured my heart and soul into this company. It's safe to say its success was built on my efforts. Moreover, I'd invested some of my own money, making me a minor shareholder. Since Victoria wanted me to resign, then we had to draw a clear line. Besides, she was clearly out of her mind, putting Julian in that position. When the company inevitably ran into trouble, no one would be able to take responsibility. The likelihood of this company going under was high. Why would I let them squander my money? When Victoria heard my terms for leaving, she was stunned. "Sincere, what do you mean?" she demanded, her voice sharp with anger as she stared at me. "Don't you know we're family? We're about to get engaged, and you're telling me you want to settle accounts so clinically?" Her eyes bored into me, filled with rage. I just looked back at her coldly. "Miss Thompson, I think it's better to settle this now. When we get married, I'll certainly contribute this money as a wedding gift. But for now, the money is still mine. So, Miss Thompson, let's keep this professional. Also," I added, "you're the one asking me to resign. I expect my severance package, plus an extra month's salary." Her face turned ugly. "We're about to be family. Have you ever seen a family calculate things so precisely?" I said nothing, just looked at her. If she didn't agree, I'd just turn around and sell my shares. I couldn't stand another day in this company. Victoria looked at me and said helplessly, "I know you're a little angry because Julian is back, but you can't be like this, Miss Thompson," I said, my tone flat. "We're in the office right now. We should keep things professional. In the past, I used to call her Vicky at the office, even joking with her occasionally, and she would be the one to use this exact formal tone with me. Now that I was using it on her, she froze. "And what if I say no?" she challenged, staring at me. "Then, Miss Thompson, please provide me with my official termination papers and transfer my severance pay. Otherwise, I will be filing for labor arbitration." My words were cold. Her expression changed instantly. I remained silent, watching her. I knew she was torn. On one hand, she didn't want to give me such a large sum of money. Buying out my shares would essentially wipe out most of her liquid cash. As for the severance for my position, it wouldn't be a small amount. But what did any of that have to do with me? I no longer loved this woman. Why should I sacrifice everything for her? She'd lost her head, but that wasn't my problem to solve. While Victoria was agonizing over her decision, I stood up. "Miss Thompson, I'll await your call. I'm heading home for the day." With that, I walked out of her office. As I left, I saw Julian Moore waiting outside Victoria's office. He shot me a provocative look. I knew then that he'd sent me that video last night on purpose. Sending Victoria to my apartment was also part of his plan to make us fight. But now, I didn't even have the desire to quarrel with him. Back in my office, my assistant, Chloe Davis, rushed in. "Big C, I heard you're resigning?" she asked, looking nervous. "How did you know?" I was surprised. Victoria had only told me this morning, and we hadn't even finalized anything. Julian Moore was here first thing this morning, she said, a hint of helplessness in her voice. He was telling everyone he's taking over your position, Big C, RMS Thompson. Yes, she agreed. I cut in, knowing what she wanted to say. And besides, Miss Thompson and I are no longer together. Go on, get back to your work, I told her. I might not be your supervisor for much longer hearing this, Chloe bit her lip. Big C, where are you going? I'll follow you, her words made me smile. We'll see, I said. After she left, my expression darkened. Julian had been here this morning. Without a doubt, he was determined to oust me. His visit to Victoria just now must have been to check on the progress. I knew that for her old flame, Victoria would agree to anything. Sure enough, just before the end of the workday, Victoria arrived at my office. This time, Julian was with her. Sincere, you're a real piece of work. How could you pressure Vicky like this? Are you even a man? Julian yelled, pointing at me. You know she's in a difficult position, and you still demand so much money from her MS Thompson. It seems you have no intention of buying my shares, I said, turning to Victoria. In that case, I'll start looking for other buyers at my words. Victoria's face changed. She had probably thought that by bringing Julian here to cause a scene, I would get into a petty fight with him and end up giving her the shares out of spite. Perhaps that was her plan all along. Now that she saw I wasn't taking the bait and was prepared to sell my shares, she panicked. Fine, I'll buy them, Victoria said through clenched teeth. I nodded, then looked at her. Miss Thompson, what about my severance pay? You'll get it, she said, taking a deep breath. And just like that, Victoria and I completed the handover procedures. I had a lawyer draft the contracts and received a substantial sum of money in USD. I looked at Victoria's sullen face and said nothing. Julian, standing beside her, looked just as displeased. But none of that mattered anymore. Sincere, come home with me tonight. My mother wants to see you, she said suddenly, looking at me. I nodded. I had met Victoria's mother, Martha Thompson, a few times. Initially, she hadn't been pleased with me. My father, David Clark, passed away when I was a teenager, and at the time, I still hadn't forgiven my mother, so I never went to her. Everyone thought I was an orphan. An orphan like me was certainly not good enough for Victoria, so naturally, Martha looked down on me. It was only after Victoria and I started making the company more and more successful that her attitude towards me softened. Since I had already decided to leave, this dinner would be my last with them. When I arrived at the Thompson residence, Victoria and Julian were already there. Julian was laying it on thick with Martha, and she was clearly charmed, lavishing praise on how wonderful he was. When she saw me walk in, her expression soured. She beckoned me over and began our chat. Sincere, I've never really liked you. It was just that Vicky liked you, and I'll admit, you're capable, Martha said abruptly. Otherwise, with your family background, you're not worthy of our Vicky. I remained silent, letting her words hang in the air as if I agreed after this dinner I was leaving anyway. Vicky told me you cashed out your shares and took a huge sum of money. Tell me, how could you do such a thing? Martha said, her tone reproachful. You need to be more considerate of Vicky. Her life isn't easy. Besides, you two are getting married soon. Isn't your money her money? Listen to me. Tomorrow I'll have our lawyer draw up a transfer agreement. You'll sign all that money over to Vicky. I let out a cold laugh internally. Just like that, they wanted me to hand over all my money to their family. Back when I loved Victoria, when I thought we would be a family, I never saw it. But now, the moment I cash out, the whole family starts scheming for my money. What a brilliant plan. I kept my thoughts to myself, nodding along on the surface without saying a word. Throughout dinner, Martha continued to belittle me while praising Julian's excellence. I just ate quietly. Once I was finished, I stood up and said my goodbyes. After leaving the Thompsons' house, I called a few friends to let them know I was leaving. They'd obviously heard about Julian's return and didn't ask too many questions, just told me to call if I needed anything. After hanging up, I went home, packed my things, booked a flight to New York, and was gone that same night. My mom, Catherine Clark, picked me up from the airport herself and took me back to her home. The next morning I got a call from Victoria. "Sincere, where did you go? Why is your apartment empty?" she demanded, her voice urgent and loud. "Victoria, we're over." "From now on you don't need to bother me," I said flatly. "Sincere, what are you talking about? You're breaking up with me? We're about to get married." Victoria exploded on the other end of the line. "Victoria, you should marry Julian," I replied coolly. "Sincere, you've misunderstood. There's really nothing between Julian and me," she pleaded, panicked. But at this point I couldn't be bothered to listen. I could see how much she adored Julian. Besides, she was with me more for my abilities and maybe for the money I had. Whatever the reason, Victoria and I were finished. I ignored her screaming and hung up the phone. My heart was dead to this woman, and I had no desire to deal with her anymore. Seeing how unhappy I was, my mom took me traveling for a few days. She then offered me a position at her company, telling me she had been alone ever since she left and that all her businesses were meant for me anyway. I gladly accepted. My mother's company was much larger than the Thompsons, and I quickly familiarized myself with it, taking over all the business operations. A few months later, I had gradually taken charge of the company's various divisions. My mother was exceptionally pleased with my abilities. She said she was at an age where she wanted to retire and that the company was mine now. One day I got a call from my former assistant, Chloe. "Big C, I'm out of a job." I was surprised to hear that. After I left Victoria's company, Julian had taken my position. Chloe was my most capable employee. If even she was gone, then many parts of the company would cease to function. Logically, Victoria should never have fired her. "What happened?" I asked, curious. "Big C, you have no idea. After you left, Julian took over our department. He knows absolutely nothing. All he does is order us around. If we make the slightest mistake or don't do things exactly his way, he just screams at us in the office," Chloe said, her voice filled with frustration. "When I was there, I handled most of the difficult projects myself. Now, Julian wasn't doing any work himself, but was forcing them to, setting all sorts of impossible demands and targets. Many of those targets were simply unattainable, but Julian didn't care. If you couldn't do it, he'd yell at you, then fire you. So many people have already quit, the whole department is in a state of panic. Doesn't Victoria do anything about it?" I was surprised. During the years we were together, even though I handled most of the business dealings, she should have known how important that position was. And now, Julian was running it into the ground. "We don't know where Miss Thompson went, haven't seen her in over a month. She's not managing the company at all," Chloe said softly. I was taken aback by this. Since she was unemployed, I offered her a job at my company. I also told her that if any of her former colleagues didn't have a good place to go, they were welcome to join as well. She replied quickly, saying she would bring people over. I never expected that because of this, Victoria would come looking for me. She couldn't find me at first, but when so many people resigned at once and came to work for me, she immediately tracked me down. As I was leaving work that day, I saw Victoria Thompson standing downstairs. Compared to a few months ago, she looked like a complete mess. Her hair was tangled, her face was pale, and her eyes were bloodshot. Her clothes were wrinkled, and she just looked sloppy. In that instant, any positive image I ever had of Victoria's appearance completely shattered. At least in my eyes, she no longer had any of the qualities that once attracted me. I stared at her coldly. She looked at me with excitement. "Sincere, I finally found you," she cried out. She rushed over and grabbed my arm. "Sincere, come back with me, we can start over." "I don't even mind that you betrayed me," she said, clutching my hand. "Victoria, when did I ever betray you?" I asked, speechless. She held on tight and said quickly, "Sincere, I've investigated everything. The owner of this company is some old woman. You're a kept man, you left me to be with her. I don't mind your betrayal, just come back," she said, her eyes fixed on mine. And I almost laughed from the sheer absurdity of it. I had never imagined Victoria would see me in such a light. "Victoria, I am not as depraved as you think. Besides, we broke up." "There's no such thing as betrayal," I said coldly. Hearing my words, Victoria's face turned exceptionally ugly. She stared at me and demanded, "Sincere, how long are you going to keep this up? I told you there's nothing between Julian and me. Don't you understand? Even if I did betray you with Julian, you cheated on me and betrayed me too," she shouted, accusing me as if I were the unforgivable one. I just sighed. In that moment, Victoria looked like a lunatic. I had no energy left to argue with her. "Victoria, I didn't cheat and I didn't betray anyone. I just saw you and your family for who you really are. You and your mom were just eyeing my money, wanting me to slave away for your family, weren't you?" I said with a cold laugh. "Besides, you love Julian. You're just upset you didn't get my money, Victoria. Go home," I said, looking at her with weary resignation. "If you keep following me, I will call the police. I told you, there's nothing between Julian and me. If you don't like him at the company, I can make him leave. We can go back to how things were before," Victoria pleaded desperately. I just shook my head. She seemed to think we could pretend none of this ever happened, but I couldn't. Seeing my refusal, she suddenly had an emotional breakdown. "Sincere, why are you doing this to me? What does that old woman have that I don't?" she screamed in a rage. Just then my mom arrived. She walked to my side and asked, "What's going on?" At the same time, her gaze met Victoria's. Victoria, in her current state, was practically unhinged. She glared at my mother, her eyes burning with fury. "Is this the girl you used to like?" my mom asked me, her expression cold. She had known about Victoria for a while. In fact, when she saw how heartbroken I was when I first came back, she was tempted to go and teach Victoria a lesson herself. I was the one who stopped her. Now, looking at Victoria, she couldn't hide the flicker of anger in her eyes. "I'm Victoria Thompson, Sincere's fiancée," Victoria said coldly to my mother. "You're old enough to be his grandmother. Is it appropriate for you to be seducing my fiancé?" Her words left my mom stunned for a second. Then, a small smile played on her lips. She looked at me. "Is she not all there? Forget it. I have nothing to say to people like this. Get her out of here," my mom said, shaking her head. She motioned to the bodyguards behind her, who moved to escort Victoria away. Victoria tried to struggle, but my mom's bodyguards simply tossed her out. I thought that would be the end of it. Surely she wouldn't come looking for me again. But I was wrong. Just half a month later, she was back. This time, Victoria brought her mother, Martha, with her. The moment they saw me, Victoria's eyes welled up with tears, looking like she was about to cry. Martha tried to grab my hand, but I stepped away. Ever since that dinner at their house when they schemed for my money, I understood that neither of them had ever truly accepted me. "Oh, Sincere Auntie knows you must still love our Vicky," Martha said, a touch of awkwardness on her face. "Auntie hopes you'll come back and marry Vicky with that." She turned to Victoria. Victoria quickly pulled out a ring box, her eyes shining with fervor as she looked at me. "Sincere, in the months since I lost you, I've finally realized that the man I love has always been you, Sincere. I hope we can start over. From now on, I'll listen to everything you say. Julian has already left the company. Please come back." She gazed at me, her eyes filled with what was meant to be deep affection. The whole scene felt like a farce. During all my years with Victoria, I had dreamed of us getting married. I had imagined proposing to her countless times. This scene I had replayed in my mind over and over. Back then, I wondered if she would excitedly say yes. Maybe she'd be overjoyed, even speechless with happiness. But now, hearing her propose to me, all I felt was a wave of disgust. The woman standing before me made my stomach turn. I ignored the performance by mother and daughter and said flatly, "That's enough, Victoria. We broke up months ago. You were with Julian. We have nothing to do with each other anymore." I looked at Victoria coldly as I spoke. After I spoke, I prepared to leave. There was no point in trying to reason with these two. Hearing my rejection, Victoria froze. Martha lunged forward and grabbed my arm, shouting, "Sincere, how can you be like this? You were with Vicky for so many years. How can you just change your heart like that? How can you be such a heartless man?" She stared at me, then suddenly started yelling to the passers-by, "Everyone, come and see my daughter's fiancé cheated on her with an old woman, and then abandoned her, and my daughter loved him so much she even neglected her own company for him. Listening to this, I just stared coldly at the mother-daughter duo. By the time my mom heard the commotion and came to my side, Martha and Victoria were busy telling strangers how shameless I was. A crowd had gathered, and several self-proclaimed righteous individuals had started to condemn me. Seeing my mom appear, Martha lunged towards her. "I'll kill you, you old vixen. You old seductress seducing my daughter's fiancé. Don't you even look at your age?" She shrieked, trying to rush forward, but my mom's bodyguards restrained her. Victoria glared at my mom with the same hateful expression. I was done with them. "Victoria, this is my mother," I said, staring at her coldly. My biological mother, both she and Martha froze, clearly shocked that my mother was not only alive, but was also a well-known business tycoon. The murmurs of the crowd, which had been directed at me, instantly died down. They backed away awkwardly, as if nothing had happened. "Call the police," my mom said coolly. With that, Victoria and Martha were taken away by the police. Just then, Chloe rushed over to tell me that Victoria's company was in deep trouble. It turned out that during the time Victoria had been neglecting the company, Julian had embezzled most of its funds and disappeared. By the time Victoria returned to her office, it was too late. Julian was gone, her company was facing enormous debts, and she was heading for bankruptcy. That was why the mother-daughter pair had targeted me again. They just never imagined that the old woman they thought was my sugar mama was actually my mother. Victoria and Martha were fined for disturbing the peace and left in disgrace. She knew it was impossible to come after me again. Neither of them bothered me anymore. I felt a sense of relief. A few days later, Chloe told me that Victoria, cornered by creditors at her company, had jumped from the rooftop. She was mangled beyond recognition on impact. Martha, unable to bear the shock, had followed her. When I heard the news, I just gave a faint smile and said, "Let's go. Time for the meeting." Whatever happened to Victoria Thompson had nothing to do with me anymore.